Awesome. All right, so welcome everyone, and I appreciate you coming to this open house at the Journeys Inn. Um, this has been the space, this digital space, and all of that is where the Journeymen have been meeting for the last couple of years. And part of why I call it an inn is part of the story of the Journeymen that I'm going to share today. But really quickly, it's basically a space where men can kind of come in and drop their shoulders and share stories, get some skills, maybe get some information from the dude in the corner. Um, and it's been a place where men get together and hold each other accountable and work with one another to move their homes and their work forward. The journey of fatherhood becomes the central piece of our conversation. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you all, and you can either think about it, you can put it in the chat, you can do whatever you'd like, but I'm going to ask you all to think for a minute about your favorite adventure story. What's the favorite story about adventure that has an adventure? And it can be a movie, it can be a book, it can be in your own life. What's your favorite adventure story and how it sort of, why? Like, why was it a part of your life and why was it something that you hold on to? So I'll give you a couple seconds just to think about that for a minute. Again, you can put it in there or not, but um, when you think of adventure, what comes to mind? You see, I asked this question, I've been asking it for the last 20 years. I ask it pretty much to every workshop I've ever done, every client that I've ever had. Um, what is an adventure? It's something that for me has been the foundation of a lot of my professional career, my social personal career, my reading and media experience. I love adventures. But at the same time, my training really forces me to question stories that are taken for granted. My training has kind of forced me to say, well, when there's a dominant story, when there's a story in culture that is just taken for granted and has sort of the answer for everything, we've got to question it. And so, just like I'm reading here, being the hero, overcoming challenges, transformational journeys, that's the answer that I got for what's your favorite adventure. When people got specific, they said Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, um, all of these adventure stories that are all over. Stand By Me is a good one, right? All over our social, mass media, popular culture, experience. So much so that was what I believed in. That story is called the hero's journey. Many of you know that, and it's a powerful narrative that has guided both fiction and, frankly, psychology for the last 100+ years. And for me, particularly the last 20 years, it was the outline of what I did with men in my office is I helped them move through a hero's journey to transform and really find the treasures in their life. But here comes narrative therapy where I have to question. I have to question taken for granted stories. And so even though I wrote my dissertation on it, I'm a huge Star Wars dork. I love the hero's journey. I had to say, all right, how is this story that's everywhere? Um, what is that? Why is that? Right. And so two answers can happen. One is because it's right? Because it's the mono myth. It's the myth of our culture and our inner psyche, and stories reflect, fiction reflects real life, and it's right. I don't believe that. And I think that, what happens is we have stories that become powerful and dominant, and they become oppressive of other stories. And that limits our expression as humans, as a culture, as people. And so, in questioning the hero's journey, right? And to sort of say this very quickly, I think, I know everyone's here, and so I know you all know this narrative, but the hero gets called out or gets kicked out of generally his home, and has to go to another land. And through magic and help and adventure, climbs a mountain, battles a dragon, gets the rare orchid, puts it in his teeth, and then narrowly escapes and gets home. And when he gets home, he saves the village, right? That's the every Pixar movie, every Disney movie, most big blockbuster movies, all the hero movies, they all have that narrative. What about the guys? What about the men, the women, the kids who stay home? What about the people who are raising the kids, taking care of the gardens, cleaning the dishes? Are in the everyday life, isn't there an adventure there? Isn't there magic in our everyday, right? And that was the question I started asking about 10 years ago, and realized all of the men coming into my therapy office were in one way or another asking that same question, saying, my life isn't legendary. My life isn't epic. So who am I? What good am I? What's my worth? And we have men who have a hard time, a challenging time, um, engaging in their emotional expression, engaging in relationships, connecting with their kids. They're really good at work, being leaders, because the hero's journey is about going out and, taking over and doing things. And, that helps. But at the same time, their foundation, their anchors are loose. And so many of the guys who were in my office for therapy were incredibly successful at work, and they were a mess at home and inside. When they really thought about it, they were using too many substances. They were having either emotional or real or physical affairs. They were not connected with their kids. They were, not really sure what to do at home, right? They were working. They were, you know, disconnected. And as a result, eventually work suffered. Their irritation, frustration, anxiety, depression spiked. And all of this came to a place where in my office, I started seeing guys have amazing progress, because we weren't talking about the hero's journey. We were talking about what I call foundational adventures or foundational journeys. And what happened is, over the time with that work, I started creating a narrative that um, I consider the other half of the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey is a great story. I did my dissertation on it, but it's only half the battle. It's only half the story. And the reality is that that hero who goes off and battles the dragon, we never really hear about the fact that they probably spent many years and hours learning how to use a sword. In fact, we denigrate, we minimize the need for all of that so that we can go off and battle dragons. Now, the problem with that is, oh, well, we do hear about it, usually in a 3-minute montage, right? And so it's literally said that's not important. And so the foundation of big adventures is minimized, and it's not made important. And my argument is, and what I've seen with the guys over the last 20 years, is that it's the most important. It's foundational, right? If we are able to create the practices and the discipline of everyday life, in fact, if we're able to elevate the status of our everyday life, we are actually freed to have epic adventures. And so in comes this idea, this realization that I have these incredibly powerful sessions with men in my office, in this sacrosanct, secret, separate from life place, this office where people can come in and safely work on anything. And that's great. But then the men walk out of the office and at least 20 to 25% of their progress is gone, because they're in a community and in a world that isn't encouraging that level of connection. And so fast forward many years later, I'm working with men, fathers specifically, where we're working on creating new stories for men, new narratives for men who can really dive into foundational adventures, connect with their partners, connect with their kids, connect at work, and learn the basic skills of, you know, being a hero at home, Now, that could be at work, that could be in the community, but starting at home, starting in the space where they are connected. And so, what I really wanted to bring into today is what are the foundational sort of pillars that the Journeyman foundational work stands upon. There's an entire curriculum, and I can talk about that a little later. There's a curriculum that I work with men, and I bring them through in our program. But the curriculum stands upon these four powerful pillars. And before we do that, and because we're going to talk about the four pillars, I want everyone to take a deep breath, because this is really important. The breathing is not woo-woo. It's not, we're not going to, well, it could be, but we're not going to do it here. When you take a deep breath in, you can literally feel it filling you up. It reminds you that your innards, your inside's important. You're filled. Now, when you breathe out, you're giving to the world. Now, that's a silly way to do it, but metaphorically, it's important, because all four of the foundations of men's work in the JourneyMen program have two parts. They have an in-breath and an out-breath, right? When we take a breath in, we're reminded of what's going on for us in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, all of those things. We have to take a moment and really consider what's going on for us for each one of these four pillars. And with our out-breath, we have to think about how that might impact, or what might be needed in the people, places, and context around us. So in and out is a reminder of the inherent connection between all of us. So now the four parts of men's work, nicely spell MENS. It's a good way to remember it. Our first part is mindful, right? And this could be meditation. This could be, a lot of mindfulness work that's going on right now. And it also, and in our work very often, is being full of mind, being aware, knowing what's going on for you. Usually life is so fast, I don't have time, I don't have this, and we're not even aware of where our mind is going when something happens. Something happens and I snap at my kids, and I didn't even realize that it was because I was hungry, or I was challenged, or I was impatient, or whatever. If I'm not mindful, if I'm not aware, then I'm going to blame someone else. I'm not going to take responsibility. I'm going to, look for something else. And again, in breath, out breath, being mindful of the people around us and around me and around like our culture, and really seeing what might be needed there. So that's mindfulness, in and out. The second foundation is experience. And I mean that as intentional experience, chosen experience, essentially action. As a man, I take action, and I need to know, well, let me be intentional about it. I'm not just doing things one way or another. I'm just not making stuff up on the fly. I'm being intentional, and I'm being intentional about what I might need. After this meeting, I'm going to probably walk around my property and just breathe, because I'm going to need to get out of this room. Or I'm thinking about in the out breath, what my kids might need, or what my family might need, or what my coworkers might need. I'm aware of what kind of actions might be useful or helpful, or supportive in that moment. The next foundation is nourishment. Now, those of you who know me, I'm really into cooking. So it's no surprise that's in one of my foundational pillars, but nourishment is also a big word, right? It can nourish your body, your mind, any of those things. But what holds you up? What fills you? And again, in and out breath, what can fill you? And you have to take care of yourself. And what do the people around me need for nourishment? And how can I support that? And then the last one, which is I think really important, but it's important. It's good that it worked out being the last letter of MENS, but it's also important that it's the last one, because you need all the other foundations to get here, which is the last foundation for men's work is social action and responsibility taking. Because as men, we do have a lot of power. We have a lot of we hold a lot of responsibility, and there's things that need to be done in our family, in our culture, in our communities. And as men, we have a responsibility to make changes. In fact, the way I talk about it often is, even at home, being a connected father is social activism. And it provides movement towards social justice and taking social responsibility in a bigger way. But it starts at home, right? It is incredibly important to say, I'm going to do things differently. So that's MENS. MENS work, mindful, experiences, nourishment, and social action and responsibility. There are so many other models for like what men need to do, but for me and the work I've done, the experience I've had over the last 25 years, I think these four things with the in and the out breath are essentially the foundational pieces that men need to do in order to be more connected, more directed, and increasingly partners in the world with the world today. So that being said, one of the things that I think is really important, this is all led to the JourneyMen Foundations program. So that is the initial group coaching program that I do with fathers specifically, who are interested in learning how to be more connected, more directed, and to deal with these obstacles, whether it's anger and frustration, irritation, loneliness, any number of the emotional expressions that we either push away or deny ourselves. Frankly, increased intimacy with your partner, increased relationships and direction with your kids, deeper conversations, those things. For fathers who want to do that, they get involved with the Journeymen. And they learn, our program is a 3-month program, and you learn the foundations, all of these skills, all of these strategies. And then they start taking the journey. And so the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to open up, I'm going to ask you all if you're interested to bring me back on video and we can have a conversation. But the last piece is, again, with a nod to the hero's journey and how we're leaving the hero's journey for foundational adventures, is that many coaching programs use the hero's journey as a model. So many of them are using warriors and this and that. And it's the idea is we're all going to get together. We're going to go somewhere. We're going to get a treasure. We're going to come back and our family is going to be different and our life is going to be different. I've been in practice for too long to believe that and to see that while can be really helpful, it's not sustainable. In fact, your biggest adventure is not with me. It's at home or at work or in your community. And so going back to why I call this Journeys In, and I'm so glad you've entered and you're joining us, is that the inn, which was always my favorite scene in all my favorite books and movies, the cantina, the taverns, the pubs, the inn is where men can come in, adventuresome, burly men can come in and let their shoulders down. And they can be given some hot food. They can sit by the fire. They can share or hear a story. They can get new skills. They can get a new map for their next, mission. And they can get some information from the shady dude in the corner, right? The inn, the Journey's Inn, the spot for JourneyMen now, that's the metaphor we use for all of the work we do. So in our gatherings, in my coaching calls, they enter the inn. And in the inn is where guys get to do all of those things. And so that being said, I welcome you here. I thank you for coming. And what we're going to do is I'm going to turn the recording off and we're going to ask some questions that are not going to be recorded. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. And we're going to, if you would like any more information about the Foundations program, certainly let me know. You can email me at jason@nourishedconnections.com. I'll also have that written up with my website and all of that. And just to let you know, for this next group, I am having what's called the Founders Group. It's the last final Founders Group of the Journeymen, and with that, there's added supports. There's a couple extra coaching sessions. There's about 6 months extra worth of support, and of course, there's a founder's price. So, if that is interested, or if you know anybody, I'm taking applications now for the January-February cohort, and it would be great to hear from you. Awesome. So thank you all. And I'm going to turn the recording off. And as that happens, you're welcome to turn your video on and ask any questions that you'd like.